In this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about some basic web design principles. The basic idea with web design is to make a functional website. It's not about how flashy it looks, it's really about how easy it is to use, something we call usability, and whether or not it helps the user accomplish some task. In other words, is it useful? Google is kind of like the poster child for simple but useful web design. An acronym you may hear from time to time when it comes to web design and even other graphical user interface design is Keep It Simple, Stupid, or KISS. So what are some general principles? Some general principles about web design are to be organized and to be consistent. When you design a website, there should be a common look and feel across pages within the site. Don't overload the user. Too many graphics, video, and even very small text can be something that not only distracts the user, but can make it difficult for them to find the site useful. Don't make long paragraphs the focus. Remember that users will likely scan the text first, not go into any in-depth reading, so use titles and bullets to draw attention to what you feel is important. Along those lines, don't conceal important information, and remember that visual quality, not quantity, is really what counts. Take a moment to look at this website, which is generally considered to be poorly designed. Why do you think it's poor design? Take a moment and consider that question. Do you have some ideas? Well, let's talk about them. As you can see, there are a lot of different things going on this particular page. There's a strange mix of colors and images. There is a lot of menu options on the left-hand side, not all of which have the same color or imagery behind them. And you have a lot of text in small font. The ad, or actually a title banner at the top, can be very distracting, and again, the colors don't seem to match the rest of the page. Generally speaking, this was kind of thrown together without a lot of thought about design. When it comes to web design, one thing to consider is how you want to organize your site. Remember, we said that each page should have a common look and feel, consistent use of colors, fonts, and so on. When it comes to how you organize the site in terms of which pages are linked to which and how the natural progression of going from page to page actually happens, we're usually talking about a hierarchical organization. That's a scheme that's generally used, but be careful to make sure that your site design is not too shallow or too deep. Often the hierarchical organization is shown as kind of like a tree, as we see in the graphic here. We don't want it too long, but also we don't want it too short. When it comes to navigation, one good thing to keep in mind is that each page should have a core navigation menu, some simple menu that allows users to go to the most commonly visited either categories or specific pages. It should be easy for the users to go back to the home page from any given page on your site. Menus should not be cluttered or too quote-unquote busy. Give limited choices and focus on the core items that you feel users will want for your site. Finally, you should avoid mystery meat navigation. Links should clearly indicate where the user will go if they click the link. Don't use links that conceal the ultimate destination, and the classic example is clicking on a link that says click here. When you design a website, you should design for your intended audience. Consider who the audience is who will be visiting your site. Are they digital natives, people who are very comfortable with technology? Are they neophytes, people who may not be comfortable with technology? For example, you may have a senior citizen-oriented website, which would be designed certainly very differently than a website designed for teens. Consider what is important to your users. Is it flash, in terms of lots of imagery, maybe some audio, or is it just the facts type of content? Simple text that allows users to get the information they need. To contrast this kind of differing audience idea, consider two sites. Here, KISS Online, designed for the rock band KISS, and bmsd.org, which is the Blue Mountain School District located in Schuylkill County. They have very different site designs because they have very different audiences. The school district website is mainly designed for parents and other community members. The KISS website, of course, is designed for members of the KISS Army. Here's another example of a poorly designed website. Let's consider why as we take a look at a few other design principles. First, we want to design for accessibility. No doubt you've heard the term accessibility in a variety of different contexts. Generally speaking, you want websites to be available to pretty much everyone, whatever their limitations or disabilities might be. There is a document out here called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, accessible through the World Wide Web Consortium, which helps to lay out some of the design principles for accessibility. Now, all of these principles are based on 4 core principles called POUR, or P-O-U-R, for an acronym. First, the content must be perceivable. The content must be operable, in the sense that interface components in the content must be operable. It must be understandable. The content and controls of the site must be understandable to the general audience. And it must be robust. The content should be robust enough to work with current and future user agents, including assistive technologies. Making a site that is designed for accessibility is often a challenge, but it's becoming increasingly easy as new technology allows us to build more complex websites. Along those lines, here are some things to consider. When it comes to text, use common fonts. For example, Times New Roman, Arial, Georgia, fonts that people are very familiar with. Sans serif fonts, like Arial, are better for viewing on the computer, while others, such as Times New Roman, are really designed for printing. You should use contrast between the background and text colors. The colors between your background and text should not bleed together, making it difficult for people to read your text. You should emphasize important text by using the strong or the emphasis tag. You should use columns if there is too much text. Expect that your user will tolerate pretty much 50 to 75 characters per line of text. So if you have a lot of text, maybe paragraphs upon paragraphs, it might be a good idea to break that into columns. And keep in mind that spelling and grammar do count. If you go to a website and there are a lot of spelling and grammar errors, it may cause you to lose trust in the site and lose trust in the information or services that site is providing. So let's get colorful. The Penny Juice website we mentioned a few moments ago had a lot of color, perhaps too much. You should use pure colors for whatever is important, and then use subdued hues, grays, light blues, greens, for everything else. That's one theory. Another theory is that you should use natural colors, especially lighter tones, and that you should use only a minimum number of colors. More of a, shall we say, minimalist approach. Cairo and Tufte are the authors of these particular opinions, and generally speaking, they apply to most well-designed websites in one form or another. In terms of color schemes, there are 3 different ways you can go. Monochromatic color schemes include shades, tints, or tones of the same color, like the 3 blue, bluish gray that we see here. An analogous color scheme includes a main color and 2 colors adjacent to it on the color wheel. Finally, a complementary scheme involves 2 colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. When it comes to layout, you have 2 basic options. With a fixed layout, the size is set in the HTML or CSS code. It involves a fixed width on the screen. Sometimes the content is centered on the screen. Now, how it accomplishes this is it uses set pixel widths. Remember that pixels are picture elements. What that means is, as you look at your screen, there are millions of pixels going across and up and down your screen. Pixel widths use a number to describe how much of those pixels a particular layout should take up. The other option is a fluid layout. This is a bit more flexible. It uses percentages for widths, allowing the content to take up the space available really based on the window size and the resolution of your particular device. There are two examples here which we're going to talk about in turn, but if you'd like to, you may certainly copy these or type these URLs into your browser so you can take a look. If you type in the URL for the fixed layout, it will actually take you to this site. Now, this site is actually just a page on the personal.psu.edu server in my account. Now, as you can see, it's a simple page. It's really just The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, but it has a fixed layout. Now, what that means is, if I shrink this window, or actually make it a little bit smaller, the content really doesn't move. Of course, scroll bars pop up to allow you to go and look at the whole page, but the content is fixed. Now, if we look at the page source, I'll make that a little bigger, you can see that for the style, we have styles set up so that we maintain the exact size of our particular content. We have, for example, a title, The Masque of the Red Death and Edgar Allan Poe, within what's called a span tag. There's a class attribute for that span tag, and we're setting it up to be the class center1, which means the text will be centered. Now we also have a div. Remember, a div is like a block element. It's a way to group things together. It has an ID of container. Container, that style, is specified up here. And we're setting up the margins and giving it a fixed width. Now the margins help to center ultimately the content, but the width is what actually makes it fixed, 800 pixels. Let's contrast that with the other layout, the fluid layout. Okay, here's the fluid layout. Notice that the page has the same content. However, it will behave differently if I shrink the window. The contents of the window will adjust to fit the available viewport. So the layout is not fixed. But let's take a look at the source so we can get a better idea of what the code is actually doing. If we look at the style, for example, we have a different width. Instead of saying 800 pixels, now it just says 100%, meaning it'll take up the entirety of the available viewport depending on the size that's available to us. This is an example of a fluid layout. When it comes to mobility, one recommendation is that you develop a separate website with a .mobi extension. Another option is to use a separate website targeted to mobile users. And you can use CSS to make the site responsive to different displays and environments, which I hope we can get to a little bit later in the course. Some other mobile design considerations are to remember that mobile devices typically have a small screen size. There's often bandwidth issues, especially with images, meaning that things may take longer to be brought down to your mobile device, such as images, video, etc. Generally speaking, with mobile devices, we prefer a single column layout, and we want to maximize the contrast between the colors. You can optimize images for mobile display by making them take up less memory, and you really should use descriptive alternate text for images. On the IMG tag, for example, there is an ALT or alt attribute that you can use to specify text which appears if, for one reason or another, the image can't be displayed. With a mobile site, you should also avoid display of non-essential content and focus on just what's important. This is the end of our presentation. Be sure to read Chapter 5 in the textbook.